every year. First of all, I'd like to thank Aaron Gross for the flyers, for the taking care of the website, for recording this shiurim today. And also like to thank the band, also continues to do a lot of work for the shul and many different ways, such as today with Zoom and everything like that, and the issues that we have in our keynote. And I want to thank Dr. Silverman for the speaker and the microphone and the amplification. It's really appreciated. Of course, we'd like to thank the sponsors. Rabbi Goldberg share is sponsored by the Kirchberg and Schenker family. I always tell people you want to know about a school, so you have to look at the product, what comes out of the school. And the Schenkers and the Kirchbergs and the Richards and many others in the shul are very happy, satisfied customers. They have wonderful children and have a lot of continued nakas from them. And it's a great deal because Rabbi Goldberg has an amazing staff at Orleans. Rabbi Goldberg was asking me how many years is it now they've been speaking. And we tried to do some research, but the archives don't go back that far. It's been so long. So we'd like to thank Rabbi Goldberg for his tremendous research established not only during the year, thank the Kirchberg and the Schenkers, and everything, and like I said, that it's school and he does for the future of Klal Yisrael, as we mentioned in the keynotes. Rabbi Goldberg's Torah today is on the topic of distance makes a difference.
If I could move to reference at all, but this could likely be the last. Yeah, I could, right? Yeah, I'm planning on.
All together.
Okay, fine. My thanks, as usual, to Rabbi Summers and to Rabbi Harris this morning for very elucidating keynotes on the keynotes, which has also been going on for many years. Certainly, I don't know how many years it's been, but I know that there was Zoom, there wasn't. I can say for sure. And videos, I'm not even sure, I guess there was videos back in then. So I don't know, Aaron, you'll figure out maybe. I'd like to find out exactly how many years it's been, but it's been a while. The technology has improved, but the galus hasn't gotten any better. But I am thankful is something that helps me with my personal Tisha B'Av to have the opportunity to come every year and to share thoughts and some learning with you. It is probably the case that it's been certainly over 20 years. But probably this, in terms of my speaking here in this shul on Tisha B'Av, so this is probably the last one, because we know that there are changes that are going to be happening here, in the shul, and with Rabbi Summers and his Rebbitzin going on to, I wouldn't say bigger or better, but different, places. So it's a little bit of an opportunity for us to feel the bittersweetness, that we're, just like with Tisha B'Av, we know that it's a moed, so we know Hashem is talking to us, but yet sometimes the message is not exactly the one that we wanted. But at the same time, we know that even though Rabbi Summers and Mrs. Summers will be moving on, the reality is that Chazal tell us that they're not leaving the tzibur, because Chazal say that hatzibur lo meis, there's no end to a tzibur. It's something that's always there. So this very special confluence of people and of Torah and of hashkafa and musar and halacha that has built this community, that's something that continues forever. And for me, the fact that this would be like technically the end of my coming to speak here on Tisha B'Av, this would be the last one, is just a sign that for sure the next one's going to be in Yerushalayim, because why else would this happen? I can't think of any other reason. So we're also accepting that within the context of the Tzibur Lomeis, and we'll be looking forward to reconvening B'ezras Hashem in the place where we all belong next year. Also going back many decades, I remember, in Santa Fe, New Mexico, where I began my practicing, being an educator, and in those days a congregational rabbi as well. Santa Fe, New Mexico is a very beautiful place, and its altitude is 7,500 feet. Many people go there. It's a tourist attraction. And we had a lot of people who would come and partake of our hospitality. And unfortunately, some of the people who came, it happened, I was there for 3 years, and it happened about once a year. There were people who would come 7,500 feet, that's pretty high. Denver's the mile-high city, so this is a couple thousand feet higher than that. And people who have heart conditions, so it's not necessarily such a great idea to go to vacation at a place that's that high altitude. And it happened, I think, on 3 separate occasions, Lo Aleinu, that someone who went to Santa Fe on vacation and had a heart condition passed away while they were there. And we were the Chevra Kadisha. We were the Vada Kashrus. We were it was just our small group of people were everything. And I remember in this one instance that unfortunately there was a woman who passed away, and we had to be involved with transporting the Nifteris to Florida, and where she was from. And I kept up with the family, at the time. And I called, I remember I don't know how long it was afterwards, a few months after the Petira. And I spoke to this woman's son, and I just said, how are you managing with your Avelis? So he said something which was profound. He said, every day, he said, it gets a little bit easier, and every day it gets a little bit harder. And he said the reason that every day it gets a little bit harder is because every day it gets a little bit easier. And he mourned the fact that the time is a healer. We know Chazal tell us that after 12 months that the nifter is forgotten from the heart. It doesn't have the intensity. So he was feeling that, yes, every day it's getting easier, but he bemoaned the fact that it was getting easier. He missed, the connection, and he missed the feeling. And he mourned the fact that that connection that had been, was disappearing. So I remember when I heard that, I considered that this was really an apt description of where we're at these days, in terms of this day, in terms of Churban Abayis, that it's been thousands of years, and every year it gets easier, but really every year it gets harder, and part of the reason that it gets harder is because it's gotten easier. And it shouldn't be getting easier. It should be with every year it becomes more and more difficult. But as was mentioned several times during the meaningful explanations of the Kinos this morning, that it does get easier. We do lack a connection. It was mentioned that I heard this from on my side of town from Rabbi Bess as well. The Reb Shach says he never gets questions about asking for leniencies when someone's an Avil, but he gets questions all the time about leniencies when it comes to the 3 weeks. And the difference, of course, is by an Avelis, it's immediate. We're connected to it. We feel it. We see it. So therefore, we don't look for leniencies. But when it becomes something that happened thousands of years ago, that happened a long time ago, well, every day it gets a little bit easier. But for us, it really should be that every day it gets a little bit harder. And the reason it's harder is because it's easier. So my goal today is to try to give us a tool that we can use to help make it not so easy. Because I don't think that we gain anything by it being easy. I don't think, although it's, technology is amazing, and both in being able to record this, and there are, I think, dozens of videos and speeches and movies, for people to see today. I wonder sometimes if there's going to be like the equivalent of an award ceremony for the Tisha B'Av video, best actor in the Tisha B'Av video. So it's meaningful, and it's better than wasting time, that's for sure. But that's one of the things that because of that, it's become easier to make it through Tisha B'Av. But we have to feel a little bit that it's, it shouldn't be easy. And I'm definitely speaking to myself. It's hard that it's become, so easy to distract oneself with meaningful things, but still to a certain extent to be distracted from the Ikar Avelis. And this is true not just in situations like today, Tisha B'Av, but I think that it's true in many things, and many of the tzaros that the Klal Yisrael have gone through, are going through, and the individual tzaros that people are experiencing in their day-to-day life around us, our friends, our family. It's easy for us to distract ourselves, and that's a chaval because it takes away from the immediacy of our being noseh ba'ol, and it takes away from the immediacy of our tefillah. And that's what I wanted to try to address in the moments I have with you today. The pasuk said back in Parshas Matos that when the Klal Yisrael went out to fight Midian, the pasuk says that they went to fight them elef lamata, that each shevet sent out 1,000 soldiers. And it repeats elef lamata. The measure says that the repetition was to say that according to one opinion, some say there were 3,000 that were sent, from every tribe. But for sure, everybody holds that there were at least 2,000. 1,000 of them from each shevet to fight. And the other 1,000, the measure says, v'yud beis elef l'tefillah. There was an equivalent number, another 1,000, equal to the number of fighters that were sent out to daven for those who were fighting. So this medrash, especially since October 7th, has become very popular because we know that there are people, soldiers every day who are putting their lives on the line. There are hostages whose lives are literally on the line every moment, every single moment. And we have to feel that there are people who are fighting, there are people who are suffering, but we need to know that there are people who are also davening. That's the way the Klal Yisrael fights. We fight with soldiers, and we fight with tefillah. This year I happened to see in a new edition of the Shmuzim of Reb Chaim Shmulevitz, Zecher Tzadok Livrocha, that he makes a diuk in the pasuk that I never noticed before. And he says that pasuk that says elef lamata l'chom matos Yisrael, the next word he says is tishlechu l'tzavah. You have to send them out to be in the army. So I guess when I learned that pasuk originally and saw that word that you send them out, I had understood it to mean that the soldiers had a shlichus, and the people who were davening had a shlichus. They each had their duty. They had a task that they were to perform. Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says it's telling us more than that. He said certainly the soldiers were sent out to fight. They had to leave the comfort of their homes and go to the front lines to fight the battle. And Reb Chaim Shmulevitz says that same word of sending them out applies also to the daveners. So he says, and you can take a look if you have the sheet of the Mar Makomas, I'll quote it for you. He says, why is it, he said, that even those who were davening, they could not daven from the comfort of their homes? Just like the soldiers went to the front lines, those 1,000 individuals who were davening for the soldiers, they also went to the front lines. They didn't daven from home. Why? He says, Ki efshar l'chushel hishtatef b'tzara mirachok. Simple but powerful statement. He says it's impossible for a person to feel and to join himself with the pain that someone else is feeling if he's at a distance. So therefore, ein tefillah osam shleima, the tefillah of those thousands would not be a whole and completely powerful tefillah. Ela k'shehim nitzoim b'kav hachazit. It would only be when they're on the front lines. You want to daven, so you have to be on the front lines. You want to say that our learning is equal to those who are the soldiers, and it is, and maybe even more so. But I'm not sure that means that you get, to take a break, to have a cup of coffee. I had a friend who was a charusa, who was both at Ein Tebi, and he had other missions. He was an assassin in the Israeli army. That was his job. And he eventually felt that he couldn't, because the conditions there, he was not able to stay in the army. He always offered his services, should they need him. But when he went into full-time learning, the number of weeks that he would have been in Miluim, that he would have done his yearly service, he kept an army schedule. He ate minimally. He slept minimally. Because if you're going to say that it's equal, so then it has to be equal. So that's what Chaim Shmulevitz is saying. You say, okay, they fight, we daven. Davening is really, really important. And maybe it's more important. But it has to be done with the same fervor. So Chaim Shmulevitz says you can't do it from the comfort of your home. And in the Yom Kippur War, he said to the boys in his yeshiva, of which many were from Chutz La'aretz, and the war was breaking out, and they were considering going home for the Bein Hazmanim during the war, understandable. So Chaim Shmulevitz told them, he said, Misha Toin, anyone who wants to claim, she'efshar lo linsoa habayta l'chutz la'aretz b'matzav shekazeh, anyone who thinks that he can travel home to Chutz La'aretz in this situation, u'hispalo mirachok, and he's going to daven from a distance, al achenu hayakarim, on our precious beloved brethren, sheker ata dober. He goes, you're saying a lie. You think you're going to go home during this Yom Kippur War and you'll daven for us in Yerushalayim and you'll daven for the soldiers who are fighting from your home in Chutz La'aretz? It's a lie. Mirachok I efshar lahargish es haseva v'hakoshi. He goes, from a distance one cannot feel the burden and he can't feel the difficulty. V'i efshar lehispalel aleinu karu'ui, and you will not be able to daven for us appropriately if you're trying to do it from Chutz La'aretz, from New York and Los Angeles and Chicago, wherever you're going. Unless you see it, unless it's in front of you. And it's such a powerful insight. I'd never thought about that before, that those 1,000 who were davening went along. You have, here's the soldier, he has his armor, he's got his weapons, he's got his davener, who's right by him. And that person who's davening is able to daven because the bullets are flying over his head too. It's a whole different picture. When something becomes immediate, when it's something that we are experiencing, and in terms of the Beis HaMikdash, it's very hard because it happened a long time ago. It happened a long time ago. So it's very hard for us to experience it. And even when it comes to situations that we know that people are suffering, but if we're not really taking the time to think about what they're going through, if we're not with them on the front lines, or if we can't be there physically, at least we have to make an effort to try to picture it in our mind so that the picture is real and we see ourselves as being on the front lines. Then we can hope that the tefillah that we're going to say will be a tefillah that's appropriate. But as long as we're davening from the comfort of our living rooms, and we say our 2 Kapitlach Tehillim, before we run off to do the next thing, and which is wonderful that we do that, and the chapter of Tehillim said is a chapter of Tehillim said and has power. But how much more powerful it would be if we really had a picture in our minds, or if we really felt it was our brother who was marching off into battle, or if it was a brother or sister of ours who was a hostage, or there was a person who we hear about who's going through an illness or some sort of parnasa difficulty, some sort of other struggle in their lives. If we felt that was really someone who we were kashur to, who we were connected to, we had a picture of what it was like for them in our minds. So then we know that the tefillah that we would say would then begin to fit the category of what Reb Chaim Shmulevitz was expecting of us. A tefillah that was karoi, one that was appropriate, one that was a tefillah shlema, because we had really a picture in our mind. And we hadn't become complacent, we hadn't become used to it, it hadn't become easier. Even for ourselves, we all know how we davened after October 7th, a year and a half ago, almost 2 years ago. So how does that compare with how we're doing now? So it's hard to keep it up. It's hard to keep it up. That's why I think that sometimes Hashem makes it that the enemy sends us pictures. Like the one that came out yesterday of an emaciated hostage who was digging his own grave. So why did that come out on Erev Tisha B'Av? Well, one reason is because the whole world is saying that we're starving them. So the hostages that came back, they said, we lost a lot of weight. We never saw any one of our captors losing any weight. And it's to help us see that, it's been almost a couple of years, so maybe it shouldn't be so easy. Or if it is easy, we have to at least feel that it's hard, that it's easy. We have to feel bad that it's easy. And do what we can to create pictures so that the easiness doesn't continue, so that our tefillos can be appropriate. Just as we say that when we're close, then we can feel, then we can see, and then we can daven. So Rashi tells us that the opposite is true also. It's a principle, what we're saying. And therefore, if one finds oneself in a position where it's too overwhelming and the pain is too great, so the way to diminish that is to move oneself away physically. That we see if you take a look at number 2 in the case of Hagar, who when she was sent away from the house of Avram Avinu the second time with Yishmael, she was sent out with a little bit of bread and some water. And the pasuk says, "V'yichul hamayim min hachemes," that the water was finished from the drug. And Yishmael at the time was sick with a fever. V'tashlech es hayela tachas echad hasichim, and she placed her child under one of the bushes. Then the next pasuk says, "V'telech," then she went, "V'teishev la mineged." That is a full stop. When that happened, she went and she sat and she was neged. She was opposite where Yishmael was. And then the pasuk says, "V'harchek," and then she distanced herself more. Kintachave kashes, like as far as you can shoot an arrow. Because she said, "Ki amra al irak v'os hayeled," because I can't bear to see my child die. So she distanced herself. Rashi says the first time when she said that she sat down mineged, opposite him, Rashi says that means mirachok. The second time, when it says that she was 2 arrow shots away, Rashi says that was kiven shekarov l'mus, when he became closer to dying, hosifa lehisrachik. So then she moved even further away, because she couldn't bear to see it. So when you can't bear to see it, so you need to have distance. So that can be a tool when someone is too close and it's too overwhelming. Hagar said, I can't bear to see it. So what did she do? She distanced herself, because she understood this principle of Rav Chaim Shmulevitz, that when you're close, you feel. And if the feeling was too overwhelming, there was something that she wouldn't be able to deal with, so then she distanced herself. And when he became closer to dying, she distanced herself even more, because she wasn't capable of seeing it. The closer we are, the more we feel. The more distant we are, the less we feel. One of the things that's astounding is that this seems to be true even after Me'av Esrim. The Pesukim say that Yaakov Avinu, when he was speaking to Yosef towards the end of his life, so he said, "Vani b'voim v'padan aram," when I was coming back free from Padam, "Mesa alai Rachel, Rachel Imenu died on me, be'eretz Canaan," and that was in Eretz Canaan. And he says, "Ve'ech b'rosham b'derech Efras, hi beis lechem." And Yaakov Avinu buried Rachel Imenu on the road close to Beis Lechem. Rashi explains that Yaakov Avinu was explaining to Yosef, it might seem to you unfair what I'm asking you to do, not to allow me to be buried in Mitzrayim. I'm asking you to take me from Mitzrayim all the way to Maras HaMachpelah and to bury me there. And that might sound unfair, because Yaakov Avinu said, I did not do the same thing for your mother. Your mother, when she passed away, I buried her right there on the road. I didn't even bother to take her into the city of Beis Lechem. So you might have a taina on me. You want me to carry you all the way to Eretz Yisrael? into Hebron and bury you there. You couldn't move my mother a few feet from the side of the road, derech Beis Lechem, into Beis Lechem. I should do this for you. So Yaakov Avinu told Yosef HaTzadik, he said, you have to know that the reason I buried her there was Al Pi Hashem. Because Hashem knew there was going to be a time when the Klal Yisrael was going to be led into Golus, and therefore if she was right there, Rachel Imenu was right there by the road as they passed by, then as we know, Rachel Mevaka al Baneha, she cries for her children. Yeah. And if they would need those tefillos of Rachel Imenu from the Olam HaEmes to help guarantee whatever level of safety could be guaranteed for the Klal Yisrael, her children who were being led into exile, and that eventually, as a result of those tefillus, and they would eventually come back. So Yaakov Avinu told Yosef HaTzadik, don't hold it against me that I didn't take your mother into the city of Beis Lechem. I would have, but Hashem told me not to. Why? Because if she would be right there, buried on the road, her tefillah would be stronger. Now, I don't know how many people here, probably everybody here has been to Kever Rachel. And how far is it from Kever Rachel to Beis Lechem? Yeah. It's half a mile. It's like right there. So would it have really mattered so much for the tefillah of Rachel Imenu had Yaakov Avinu given her the kavod of burying her in a proper place in a city, instead of by the side of the road? He had to do it because her tefillah would have been stronger. How far is it? Is it half a mile? From Kever Rachel to Beis Lechem? It would have made that much of a difference? The answer is, it would have made that much of a difference. Hashem said so. But she needs to be right there. Even though we're talking about Rachel Imenu, who had tremendous love for her children. And even though we're talking about a Rachel Imenu who's in a world where time and space don't matter. Somehow or another it seems that being right there where you see it means you feel it. And that would change the tefillah, the quality of the tefillah of a Rachel Imenu. So our ability to see and to experience and to feel, if she needed it, so then we have to try to make some efforts ourselves to be able to do the same thing. Another place that we know that this is true is from our Rabbi, Moshe Rabbeinu. The pasuk says, as we know, that when Moshe Rabbeinu, even though he was raised in the house of Paro, the pasuk says, Vayar b'siv loisam, that Moshe Rabbeinu went out to see the Jewish people and to see their suffering. And the pasuk says, the Medrash explains, what did he see? Mahu Vayar, what does it mean that Moshe Rabbeinu saw? Shahayaroa b'sivlosam, he saw their suffering, uboche, and he cried, va'omer, and he said, Chaval li aleichem, woe to me for what you're going through. Mi yiten mosi aleichem, I would give my life for you, he said. She'ein l'cham melecha kasher memlechas hatit, because there's no harder labor than that of making those bricks. And therefore, as a result, v'hayanosen kasefo v'mesayel kol echad v'yachad mihim. He put forth both of his shoulders to help each and every one of them. So Moshe Rabbeinu did an amazing thing. He left his comfort of his home and he went to see the suffering of the Klal Yisrael. When he saw it, the next thing he did was he davened. He cried. He cried for them. But he didn't leave it with crying alone. He then went to help each and every one of them. And he put forth both of his shoulders to help each and every one of them. That's because he had the courage to go out and see. And going back to yesterday, on Shabbos was the yard site of Rabbi Umori Rav Moshe Chait Zecher Tzaddik Livracha. So when I left Eretz Yisrael, when I left the yeshiva to go to Santa Fe, New Mexico, I think I've mentioned this here on several occasions, that I asked the Rabbi, I said, what's the most important thing for me to know? I'm going to a place where in New Mexico at the time, even Chabad was not in New Mexico. So what do I need to know? The closest Yishuv, of Yidden is Denver, which was 382 miles away. I know because we drove it many times. That's far away. What's the most important thing for me to know? So he said, the most important thing for you to know are the first Ma'amorim in the Sefer Chochmah Musa from the Alter from Kelm on the subject of being Noseh Ba'olim Chavero. He goes, if people feel that you're carrying their burden, so they'll be patient with you. If people feel that you're not carrying their burden, then they won't be so patient. That was his advice. The most important thing that a Rav needs to have is to be a Noseh Ba'ol, as the people in the shul can testify. So I would say that I had that conversation in 1988. So that was a while ago. There have been many circumstances that have come up in those almost 40 years. So I could say so far, Rabbi Chait is batting 1,000. He's only been right 100% of the time, which is a very good batting average. Those Ma'amorim from the Alter from Kelm are based on this medrash, on Moshe Rabbeinu, most of them, on leaving his house, leaving his station, going out and seeing the suffering of the Jewish people. Let's see how the Alter from Kelm puts it. He says, "Hinei metzinu b'Moshe Rabbeinu olav Hashem b'parsha Shmos v'yigdal Moshe v'yar b'siv losam l'pirush Rashi." That means, what does it mean? V'yar nosan eino v'libo yilihiyos meitzar aleim. He put forth both his eye and his heart to feel their pain. Pirush, that means, hirgil atzmo, he accustomed himself, b'tziur, by having a picture in his mind. He accustomed himself to have a picture in his mind, ki'ilu kara loy zos, as if this was happening to him. That's what makes the difference. Is it an abstract thing that happened thousands of years ago? Is it something that's happening to a neighbor? Is it something that I read about? Or is it as if it's something that I myself am experiencing, as if it was someone who was close to me who was experiencing it? He knew he needed to do that. Ulechein, halach liros. So he went to see. Ki yadua. Ki kol chatzir bo mehizkarvus hachush. Because kol chatzir, having a picture in your mind, comes from being close, so you can feel it emotionally. Ukamokein hirgil atzatzmo b'tziurim. So he went out to see, and then he accustomed himself to keep the pictures in his mind. Until he was able to feel their pain. Kumo shehu atzmo haya b'tzar hazeh. That's the second time he said it, as if it was happening to him. Umamelo noso ba'oli mohim. So automatically he carried their burden because he was experiencing it. V'yoter mitzaro, and even more than just his individual pain. Kihem harabim. Because there were so many of them, the Klal Yisrael, but Prat Klal Yisrael. He was seeing what's happening to the Klal Yisrael. And that was now in his heart. And like we say about Hashem, Ubakol Tzarosam Lo Tzar, when we're in pain, it's painful for Hashem. Moshe Rabbeinu was very good at the halachta b'drochav. And when the Jewish people were in pain, he knew that Hashem was in pain, he felt Hashem's pain too. And therefore, in his agony, he cried out and he said, that's how it came about that he had the unbelievable audacity to say to Hashem, Lama hari oisa la'am hazeh. Why have you treated this nation so pitifully? That's quite a chutzpah to say something like that to Hashem. And the Alter says, remember Mei Meriva? He hit the rock instead of speaking to the rock. All the Rishonim are wondering, what did he do? Yeah. And for that, Moshe Rabbeinu was not allowed to go into Eretz Yisrael. So which is worse? Whatever happened at Mei Meriva, or turning to Hashem and saying, why are you treating the Jewish people so miserably? So the Alter says, accusing Hashem of treating the Klal Yisrael miserably was way worse. And that's why the Medrash says, "Ve'osa shah bikesh midas hadin lifgoy b'Moshe." The Sultan midas hadin wanted to do Moshe Rabbeinu in. You can't talk to Hashem like that. Amar Hakadosh Baruch Hu hinichu loy bishvil kovol Yisrael diber. Leave him alone, because he said those words in his agony, but he did it for the sake of the Klal Yisrael. And Hashem knows how that feels. So there's even an allowance for chutzpah. When that chutzpah is born, of our closeness and our connection and our seeing and therefore feeling the pain of others. And this is what we said. He put forth his eyes and his heart to feel their pain. And he explains that means Einov. What does it mean, his eye? He thought about it in his mind. He used his das. We're going to come back to this. He didn't lose his mind. He kept his wits about him. V'libo hainu leheshiv el alev, to place it upon his heart. Sheyargish libo b'tzoram ki'ilu hu ba'atzmo b'tzar hazeh, as if he himself was experiencing it. That's the third time. As the pasuk says, "V'yadata hayom v'hashevosa el levavecha." V'racharei shu margish b'tzar, since he felt their pain, mitzdayer harbe kaviyochol al tzar hashchina. So then Moshe Rabbeinu was able to feel Hashem's pain too. This imagining, this keeping a picture in our mind, is just not what we experience for what people suffer, but we need to be thinking a little bit about the Chil Hashem factor. And so to speak, what is Hashem experiencing? This is not the way he wanted it to work out either. And to feel for ourselves the Tzara Shel Malka. We read Neicha, Shifchi Kamayim Libech, I'm going to pour out my heart like water, Nochach Pnei Hashem. As if I'm Nochach means I'm present, as if I'm there, as if I'm really seeing what it's like from Hashem's point of view. The Smita of Nesiya Soul is it's not only for Beinom L'Chavero, but it's Beinom L'Makom too. And therefore the author says an amazing thing later on in these collection of Ma'amarim. He says that people think the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha is that a tzaddik believes and a rasha doesn't believe. He said it's not true. He says the reality is that everybody believes. Emunah is something that's in the heart of every person. He goes, the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha is that a tzaddik has koach hatzir, he's got a picture in his mind of who Hashem is and what Hashem has done for him and what Hashem's, so to speak, going through. And the rasha also believes, intellectually, perhaps, it's in there somewhere, but he doesn't have a picture. So if you don't have a picture, then many of the other pictures that are out there will come in and replace that picture. There's a lot of pictures out there. So the author from Kelm says the difference between a tzaddik and a rasha is not in emunah. He goes, everyone's a ma'amin. There's no atheists in foxholes. It's just that the tzaddik has a picture. And he does things to concretize his emunah in Hashem. That's one of the reasons that the Mahalach of Rabbi Victor Miller remains so popular, I think, is because it's real. When you have a person who says, I want to appreciate that Hashem gives me the ability to breathe, so he fills up a sink with water and sticks his head in it, so he can pull his head out of it, and then, now I can take a breath. That he looks for opportunities to appreciate the genius of a watermelon seed. And he keeps those pictures in his mind. That means he's a tzaddik because he has a picture in his mind, and there's many other pictures that are coming in to take over that picture, so he fights back with other pictures. So emunah is also a function of being close, of not it being theoretical, of not it being something that's just out there in the distance, something that happened a long time ago, Ma'amad Har Sinai. We have to make an effort to try to picture these things. By Ma'amad Har Sinai, it's a mitzvah. That a person has to picture and not forget. We have to keep a picture of what it was like to try to imagine that. Revolva speaks about this often. That we have to try to keep that image, keep that picture alive. Certainly, moments in our life when we have felt close to Hashem, when we felt that Hashem was really there and helping us, or we felt connected, one has to make an effort to freeze those moments, because not every moment do we feel it. Not every moment do we have that closeness. Sometimes we feel that Hashem is very, very far away. So one of the ways we can fight back is by freezing in our mind moments when we had the clarity, when we knew it was true. And I have that picture in my mind that I can call on when the going gets tough. We saw in the case of Moshe Rabbeinu that not only did it cause him to have an emotional reaction that he cried, But his emotions, he allowed to put him into motion. And we see it true in a couple other instances. One is that at the Chet Ego, the pasuk says, "Vaydaber Hashem el Moshe lech red ki shiches amcha asher ha'liso me'eretz Mitzrayim." You better get down from this mountain because the people that you took out of Mitzrayim are doing a very destructive activity. He told them about the Chet Ego. At that time, Moshe Rabbeinu was already in possession of the Luchos. He didn't do anything to the Luchos when he heard Hashem tell him about it. It was only later, Vayhi kasher karav el hamachane, when Moshe Rabbeinu came close to the camp, Vayar es ha'ego u'machayles, that he saw the dancing and he saw the ego. Then Vayichar af, then he became upset, and then he broke the luchos. So I would venture to say that Moshe Rabbeinu hearing about the Chet Ego, I would say that was very reliable source of information. Would you agree? Yeah. It doesn't get any better than that. But he didn't break the luchos until he saw it. Because you can hear from the Ribbono Sholom about what's happening. But unless you see it and you feel it as a result of what your eyes have seen, it doesn't bring you to do anything. And for that same reason, the Orach Chaim HaKodesh says that the pasuk says by the Meraglim that Yehoshua and Kalev, who are of the Torimis Ha'aretz, of those who spied out the land, when the Meraglim came back with their evil report, they, Yehoshua and Kalev, tore their clothes in mourning. Who did not tear their clothes? Moshe and Aaron. Now, let's consider for a moment. Do we think that Moshe Rabbeinu had an understanding of what was lost about Eretz Yisrael? The one who we're going to read next week, Davin V'eschanan Tefilos, to be able to get into Eretz Yisrael. Did he have an appreciation for what Eretz Yisrael was? I think so. And the same for Aaron HaKohen. But because they didn't see it, and the Meraglim did, the Meraglim were able to tear their clothes, and they weren't held. They could be taken to task. What right did you have to rend your clothes when your Rebbe didn't? Well, they had an excuse. My Rebbe's my Rebbe, but he didn't see it. I have an advantage. I saw it. And because they saw it, so they had the emotion, and the emotion brought them to action. I remember years ago I heard from Rabbi Noach Weinberg, Zecher Tzaddik L'Bracha, a couple of maisim that have to do with this issue. He said that there was a fellow who he knew, who he was, collecting for the yeshiva, and this fellow owned, even back then, in the 70s, retirement facilities. So he came to Rav Noach and he told him a story. The story was that I had a big problem a little while ago because there was a lady in my retirement facility, and because there were some Jews in his retirement facility, so he served everybody kosher food. So there was a lady, a Jewish lady, who was one of them, who heard that the food that she was being served was kosher. She goes, "I'm not eating kosher. You have no right to feed me kosher food." Or maybe, I may have had the story, maybe he felt the non-Jewish people he gave non-kosher food, but the Jewish people he gave kosher food. And she goes, "I want what they're eating." And he couldn't do that. So that was the story. So Reb Noach asked him, "So what happened?" So the fellow told Reb Noach, he said, "I told you." He goes, "You told me?" Yeah. He said, "They're in kosher, she's not in kosher." And not only that, she said, "When the inspectors come, I'm going to tell them you're forcing me to eat different food than the other people. And I'm going to see this place closes down." So the fellow said, Noach said, "What happened?" He goes, "I told you what happened." He goes, "You didn't tell me what happened. What happened?" He goes, "I told you what happened." He goes, "What happened?" He goes, "I told you. She was going to close me down. So of course I convinced her to be from." He was makar of her. He goes, "I told you what happened. They were going to close down my facility. So of course I convinced her to be from." Because it wasn't just some theoretical, abstract thing. They were going to close down his business. So I've got to convince her to be from. So he didn't take no for an answer. He found a way. There was another time that he was raising money, and he gave him his whole drasha about Isha Torah and the state of the Klal Yisrael and everything that he's doing. And this was a very wealthy individual. And the guy hands him a check for $180. And he says, here's $180. He goes, but I have a nephew who is engaged to someone who's not Jewish, and the marriage is supposed to happen in 2 weeks. You convince him not to marry this girl, I'll give you $18,000. So what Reb Noach is doing for the Klal Yisrael, so that's one thing. That's worth 180. My nephew, now we're talking 18,000. What's the difference? Closeness, distance. When it's somebody out there, it's one thing. When it's immediate, that's worth 18,000, maybe more. So that's what we have to try to do, is that we have to try to make it that there's not such a distance. Because as we saw from Hagar, when there's distance, you don't feel it. And you see from Chaim Shmulevitz that when they're out in the war, you've got to be on the front lines with them. Kama she'efshar. How close to the front lines can you get? How close to that tunnel can you get before you say your Tehillim? And I just want to put a caveat on this. And as you'll see that by Moshe Rabbeinu, that he kept his wits about him. Even though he cried and he felt the emotion, he then came up with a plan about how to, the Medrash goes on, I didn't quote it, but he came up with a plan to help each and every Yid by pretending that he was helping Paro. He came up with a plan. Because when we feel emotions, it's very important for us not to lose our das. Einov v'libay. Einov means eina seichel, the eye of our mind. We still have our mind, but we also have our emotion. Why? Because I heard, it was last year, it might have been the year before, from Rav Lopiansky, Shlita. He said a very powerful thing. He says what we're experiencing in the world today is a major lack of das, which is actually, according to Chazal, one of the things we're mourning on this day. Is that Deo was given Bein Shnei Osios and Mikdash was given Bein Shnei Osios, between two names of Hashem. One of the things we're mourning today is a loss of das. When people stop thinking, this is what he said, it's very true. When people stop thinking, then who wins? Whoever has the better picture. Whoever gets their picture on the front page of the New York Times wins. And that's really bad for us because Israel, we're really bad at getting pictures, the right pictures on the New York Times. The only time we have a picture in the New York Times is because a Jew did something we're not proud of. But the other team, they get their pictures on the front page of the New York Times. They have really, really great pictures. Even the President of the United States says you can't fake starvation. Oh, yes, you can. That's what they found out. That was a kid who'd been sick from birth, treated in an Israeli hospital, and that's why he's alive. But that's the poster child for the starvation. So when people stop thinking, then whoever has the best picture wins. So don't get the idea that it's all about pictures. It's about pictures motivating us. It's about pictures making us feel close. It's about seeing it with our own eyes. But then we have to think of what's the plan. And when we see a picture, is it right? Is it true? How can we use it in an effective way? It's not just a moment of religious exaltation. We need time to be able to think. And we need to process the picture. And then we could do something effective with it. I want to close with one other thought, maybe two other thoughts. Just as we feel connected and our tefillah and our actions are better when we're close and when we've seen, there's a power in closeness. That explains also why there's pain in separation. And there is something that's out there in the world that's called separation anxiety. And it's a real thing. We find it mentioned in Chazal. Shlomo Hoffman quotes two places. It says, he quotes a Malbim in Parshas Lechacha, Lechacha mi'artzecha mi'ladecha mi'beis avicha. So if it's already Lechacha mi'artzecha, that includes mi'ladecha mi'beis avicha. So why do you have to say all three? So the answer is, he says, because the pasuk is talking about erech tsar hapreda. It's in the reverse order of the value of the intensity of the pain of separation. So a person feels certain separation when he leaves his country, more when he leaves his homeland, most of all when he leaves his father's house. But separation anxiety, because we see that there's a lot born of being close. So when you know that there's going to be a separation, that causes pain. Similarly, we find that Avram Avinu, back to that event when he sent Yishmael, who was sick, and Hagar out of his house, the pasuk says that the water was finished off from the Kli. So the Maharal asked the question of, he knew he was sick, because Rashi says the reason that they didn't have enough water is because someone who is sick drinks a lot. So the water was consumed by Yishmael more quickly than normal because he was sick. The problem was that Avram Avinu knew he was sick. So why would he not have given him enough water for a sick person? This is Avram Avinu we're talking about. So the Malbim says an amazing thing. He said he didn't think that Yishmael was really sick. He thought he was just homesick. He says, and homesick can give you a fever. My friends and colleagues who are sleepaway camp counselors can tell you homesickness, for sure it causes kids to get gastronomically ill. Yeah, they for sure get sick to the stomach, literally, yeah. Because of tsar hapreda, because of the pain of the distance. So what this day is about is for us figuring out what can we do to feel some tsar hapreda. I remember one of my sons, he had grown up kind of around the school, so when it came time for him to go to nursery school, he just trotted off to class. So I said to him, Simcha, how about a little bit of separation anxiety? Just to make me feel good. So I think that Hashem feels that way. How about a little separation anxiety? How about feeling a little bit, do we have some sort of picture of the Beis HaMikdash? If the Beis HaMikdash is too much, how about some sort of picture of young, handsome soldiers, beautiful soldiers, still, marching off to their demise in too great numbers? And how about a picture of someone who is emaciated and digging his own grave? So these pictures have to bring us close. And so, where are you, Hashem? We want to be close to you. And this has been a long, bitter galus. And we need some separation anxiety. And if we're not feeling the separation anxiety, it's because maybe we're just too familiar. It's just too easy. And we have to feel a little bit of pain over it being so easy. Finally, the Gemara says about Rabbi Preda. Rabbi Preda had a Talmud, didn't have the greatest head, it seems. And everything that the Rabbi Preda wanted to teach this Talmud, he had to teach him 400 times. After he taught him 400 times, he would learn it. One day, Rabbi Preda knew he was going to be called away to do a mitzvah. So that day, when he taught his Talmud, Talmud could not learn it all. So Rabbi Preda asked him, he goes, what's the difference today than all the other days? So the student told him, he said, well, since I heard that you were going to be being called away for a mitzvah, he goes, I wasn't able to concentrate. He goes, I became confused in my mind. I wasn't able to concentrate. Why? Because I said, Kol Shaita Amina, every moment I said, Hashta Koimar. Right now, Rebbe's going to leave. Hashta Koimar. No, now he's going to leave. He couldn't concentrate because he kept thinking that his Rebbe was going to leave. So Rabbi Summers, the next couple months, don't expect anybody to concentrate. Because you have, with you and your Rebbetzin, with real Mesiras Nefesh, have made a contribution to the establishment of the Los Angeles community, you and your father before you, made a contribution that most people don't remember, don't recognize, don't think about. Yeah. And that's a pity. But that's what happens. But those who were close and those who watched it and those who appreciate it, so they know. So your tzibur, is now in a matzav of, well, wait a second, hashta koimar. The Rebbe's going to leave in a minute. Rebbe's going to leave in a minute. When that happens, you can't concentrate it. So don't hold it against them. Okay? They're all doing the best that they can. And we wish you whatever happens, and wherever things take all of us. It should be with the bracha and with hatzlacha. And the sense of what we're talking about, his karvus and closeness and emotion and seichel, all combined, which is what you worked so hard to build. And before anybody else was doing any of the stuff that they do now, you were doing it here first. And they wouldn't have had the basis upon which to build had you and your father not done it previously. So hopefully people, at least at a moment, take a look back, and realize that. And I imagine that we're going to have a little bit of separation anxiety, over here. All of us, probably you will too. But it should be a separation anxiety which is for the good, because we want that closeness. And as I said at the beginning, if we see that this is happening, it's got to be that we'll be reconvening in Eretz Yisrael, Be'ezus Hashem. And hopefully you have a lot better and bigger people to be giving you the drasha on Tisha B'Av. I'll be there in the audience. I'll be listening along with you, Be'ezus Hashem.